Reading 25 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll. Further note on acceptance of oneself. Preliminary note on silence. Cormead Ugle, April 6, 1946. The work says much about the practice of inner silence. One must practice the sealing of oneself from oneself. As regards mechanical talking, the sealing of oneself from one's mechanical self, from mechanical talking, from scandal, bad talking, which makes it so difficult to seal oneself from oneself. The work can only grow from what is sealed in oneself and protected from life. We can know many things about one another, but never speak of them. One rule of the work is that when we meet each other, accompanied by strangers, we do not recognize each other. This is an example of silence. I will speak further of this and what the intention of it means at a later meeting. Ordinarily, that is, mechanically, everyone blurts out how he or she saw so-and-so with so-and-so. This is mechanical, and usually scandalous talking. This is what is meant by the verse in the book of Proverbs, quote, "The wicked man speaketh with his feet." Proverbs 6:13. At a recent meeting, it was said that one must not work against one's being until one has accepted it. It must be understood that this means something on a very big scale. We have, of course, as we are, to try to work on our being according to what the work teaches us to do in that respect. I find this very difficult to explain. Let me try to give some approximate example. Let us take mechanical talking, about which the work speaks so much. If I do not accept the fact that I talk mechanically, I will not be able to change it. I will say that I work against mechanical talking in myself, that I always do my best not to talk mechanically. Yet at the same time, if you can see what I mean, I am not necessarily accepting that I talk mechanically. I am still working from false personality. Therefore, my work will be unreal. Some people, Mr. Ouspensky once said, work all the time in a kind of dream. They do not really see, he added, what they are working on. For this reason, he emphasized so much that we have to see this other side, which we keep in darkness and do not properly accept. As was explained, this is due to the curious action of buffers in us, which prevents us from seeing what we are really like and what we have in ourselves. Things have to be driven home into us before we can find the strength really to see and change ourselves. That is why sometimes it is very useful to be told by your teacher that, for example, you talk mechanically. It becomes a shock, although in a sense you have admitted that you do, but you do not do anything about it. When a person tells you that he knows quite well that he is a liar and admits it quite easily, you may be quite certain that he has not accepted the fact that he is a liar. If he really understood emotionally that he is a liar, he would never mention it just like that. As I said, the action of buffers is very curious because it keeps us in a sort of half state. We both know, and we do not know. But the actual fact has not yet been driven home into our consciousness that we are liars and lie practically every time we open our mouths. Just in the same way, a man can acknowledge that he has many different eyes in him. He may talk glibly about it all, but he does not yet accept it. He does not see emotionally that it is quite true that he is not one but many different people. In such a case, the work rests on the surface of such a person and has not yet penetrated and become real to him. He may say that he observes himself every day, but he is not really observing himself. He imagines he observes himself, and so he lives in imaginary eye. The work has to penetrate into all centers eventually. The great problem of the work is how to awaken the emotional center. When the emotional center is awakened, your whole theme of yourself changes. You see that you do not remember yourself. You see emotionally that you do lie, that you do speak mechanically. You see emotionally that you do not work on yourself, but all the time pretend that you do. It is the awakening of the emotional center that drives things home, so that we realize these strange words. Thou art the man. David, after he had taken Bathsheba for his wife, having caused her husband Uriah to be slain in the forefront of the battle, was visited by the prophet Nathan, who told him in a parable. The parable was about a rich man with many flocks and a poor man who had only one ewe lamb. Although the rich man had many sheep, he took the poor man's one ewe lamb and killed it when he needed a meal for a guest. On hearing this, David said in anger, The man that hath done this is worthy to die. Whereupon the prophet said to him, Thou art the man. You know how difficult it is when an accusation is brought home to you, how you turn and twist and justify yourself and find excuses. In other words, you cannot accept it. This work becomes very real and grim as people advance in it, and that is why acceptance is so necessary. Acceptance destroys personality and all imagination about oneself, and brings one to a new basis from which the work can start. But for this to happen, real self-observation must take the place of imaginary self-observation. Something must be broken in us before we become sane, before we can begin to awaken. Let us review briefly what this work teaches us about man on this earth. The work says that man on this earth is asleep, and that the whole world is full of sleeping people, and for this reason nothing can go right with the world. The work says that this sleep is a strange form of sleep, and calls it hypnotic sleep, and here the work parable comes in which it is said that there were 2 farmers who had a great many sheep. Being very lazy and mean, when they found that some of the sheep were escaping, they decided to hypnotize the sheep and to tell them that everything was very beautiful and wonderful, and to teach them to sing hymns and to make them believe that they were all going to heaven. Actually, all that they wanted was the wool on the sheep's backs for their own purposes. This state of hypnotic sleep which humanity lies in is not outside you but inside you. This is why the work says that everyone lives in false personality and in imaginary I. If this hypnotic state is to be broken, we have to wake up to ourselves, and as long as we are governed by false personality and imaginary I, we shall remain asleep. It is for this reason that the work teaches us so much about what we have to do, what we have to observe, and what we have to work against and separate from in ourselves. Let us speak for a moment about negative emotions. You know the work teaches that the emotional center is dominated by negative emotions, and that this beautiful and wonderful instrument, which, if purified, can give us even clairvoyance, is rendered useless by all the self-emotions arising from false personality. When people identify with the infinite variety of their negative emotions, they remain in a state of hypnotic sleep and are used by these 2 farmers who simply want their wool and their flesh, and so it is a good thing to study how to awaken. All awakening begins with self-observation, through which you gradually realize that you are not the person you thought you were. That is, if you accept what your observing eye gradually teaches you about yourself. All this is called making personality passive so that essence can grow. When you can accept every accusation and insult without reacting violently, you are beginning to understand the place from which this work can grow and produce another being in you. So notice what upsets you most violently, what makes you indignant, what makes you say that you cannot stand it any longer. For this is a very good guide to self-observation and to what you have to observe. When you begin to feel your own nothingness, you begin to receive the help of the work, to replace that nothingness by something. So you have to go down a long way before you begin to go up.